Good day, everyone. Today we are going to talk about quantitative research. During your grade 11 days, you have been acquainted already of what is a qualitative research. And today, you are tasked to make a quantitative research paper at the end of the semester. So, so in this video, we're going to talk about the components of a quantitative research, who and what should you include in your research, and why do you conduct your study. And we're also going to talk about the different types of quantitative research that you can actually utilize later on as you continue to develop and create your own paper. As what I've mentioned earlier, I told you that you have already the idea of what is a qualitative research since it was your research before coming to grade 12, right? You were tasked to make a whole qualitative research or a qualitative proposal when you were in grade 11. And I think by now you have already the idea of what is a qualitative. The previous video that I have shared with you using the YouTube link that I have sent you talked and discussed about the difference between inquiry and research. As what we have mentioned there is a difference between inquiry and research. In inquiry, they're both investigation, right? They both investigate on things that interest you as a person who thinks and has cognitive skills. However, the difference between them comes in because inquiry revolves around the idea of just asking question, whether this question could be open-ended or closed question. And inquiry does not really require a systematic and scientific steps on how to get answers. And that is the difference of it from research. Research takes into consideration a lot of things, especially the systematic and step-by-step process of knowing things, of discovering things, of creating and producing things. And that is a research, and that is the difference of research and inquiry, right? However, they are both investigation. Okay, so that was just a quick recap of what transpired during the first video that I have sent you. This video right here will be composed of 4 lessons. Okay, the remaining 4 lessons for Unit 1. Okay, we're going to talk about quantitative research, experimental research, non-experimental research. We're also going to talk about variables, which will be very useful later on when you try to formulate your own statement of the problem. Now, we are going to continue discussing with quantitative research. Quantitative research. So what should we know about quantitative research? We have to take note that there is only one keyword that we have to put in mind when we think about quantitative research, and that is numerical. All right, so here in our PowerPoint presentation, one word that reflects the true nature of this type of research is numerical. Later on, we are going to go in depth in discussing about how or what differs quantitative research with qualitative research. All right, so let's just keep our mind focused on quantitative research. What is a quantitative research? So basically, as what the slide says, it's numerical. Okay, so it has the presence of statistics. All right, class. So numbers gonna take into consideration when we think of quantitative research. It means that data or details, results, or things, or even variables are expressed, all right, and can be interpreted using numbers, so that later on at your result, at the end of your research, as you are trying to collate and process the result of your research, it will be very objective, right? What do you mean by objective? It means that um, it is only it is only proven by facts, right? No opinions, no personal biases, no personal agenda on the result, or no manipulation of data, all right, on the numbers or the figures stated sa imong research. All right, so since it is numbers, numbers would actually tell us of the meanings of certain details, or the meanings of the ideas nga nakuha natin sa ating research. All right, so um, that is how quantitative differs from qualitative research, right? So expressions like numerical forms, objective thinking, is what I said, statistical methods. So there is the utilization of statistics, all right? So these are ang mga methods, bala, or these are ang mga processes kung paano naton kung diin gina-undergo ang data kag gina-process, right? So that's statistics. Later on, we're going to talk about it as well. And measurement signal the existence of quantitative research. The term numerical is a descriptive word pertaining to or donating a number or symbol to express how many, how much, or what rank things are or have in this world. Expressing meaning through numerals or a set of symbols indicates specificity, particularity, or exactness of something. All right. So as what I have told you earlier, um, if the numbers or the results or the data, kita class data, these are the things, or these are the result, okay, or certain information present in your study. All right. So mga primary information. For example, if the advantage of quantitative is that it indicates specificity. Okay, so very specific ang imong result, and then very particular, and there is exactness of meaning, since things are expressed and being given meaning using numbers. All right, so that is what we mean by quantitative research. Quantitative research as well makes you focus your mind on specific things by means of what I've said earlier, statistics that involve here, statistics that involve collection and study of numerical data. Thus, to give the basic meaning of quantitative research is just to say that research, it is a way of making any phenomenon or any sensory experience clearer, right? Or mas athag, all right? Or more meaningful by gathering and examining facts and information about such person, thing, place, or event appealing to your senses. So basically, ang quantitative research would just tell us, or would just tell us or clarify things out. Okay? So, amo na ang quantitative research. By means of gathering information and examining facts and opinions. You use mathematical operations, right? So what are some mathematical operations? Addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, to study and express relationships between quantities or between your numbers. Okay? Gina undergo mo siya some statistics and mathematical operations, as what I've said, the mga addition, subtraction, because you want to get and you want to study and express relationships between or among your quantities or numbers or details na involved sa imo study, or magnitudes shown by numbers or symbols. Involving measurements and amounts in your research means that quantitative research seeks, okay, it searches, okay, it wants to get answers to questions starting with how many, how much, how long, to what extent, and the like. Answers to these questions come in numerals, all right? So that's why it's quantitative research, percentages and fractions, among others. Okay, here, there are some characteristics of a research paper, or a quantitative research paper. Since quantitative research use numbers, as what I said, and figures as well, to denote a particular thing, or to express or to mean a particular thing, this kind of research requires you to focus your full attention to the object of your study, right? So, to the object of your study. Doing this, you tend to exclude your own thoughts and feelings about the subject or object. It's basically an opposite of what is a qualitative research, because in qualitative research, you are trying to go in depth, right? You are trying to discuss in a deeper manner, ginapadalman mo discuss ang mga bagay-bagay, right? So that it can be explained, so that you will have answers why, for example, why people act the way that they do, all right? Or why people act this characteristic towards other people, okay? So in qualitative research, qualitative, gina-explain mo lang na class, all right? Using words, using verbal symbols. However, in quantitative research and in qualitative research, you can give your own meaning and personal biases in your opinion, because ano gani, ginapadalman mo gani, di ba? Gina-explain mo of why does it happen, why is it like this and that. However, in quantitative research class, you exclude. Anong exclude? Ginakuha mong imo ang personal biases, ang personal mga opinion and your own thoughts about certain things, okay, about the subject or object of your research, because the numbers would tell the result by itself, okay? So you don't need your personal biases in your opinion in your study, okay? Quantitative research, okay, so let's go to the some of the characteristics. Quantitative research is described as objective research in contrast to qualitative research that is subjective, okay? So subjective and qualitative research, because you give your own opinion, okay? That is just basically how it means, okay? What it means. Objective and quantitative research, because of course you don't give your own opinion. Quantitative research is analogous to scientific or experimental thinking. Analogous, okay? So basically, it is comparable, okay? Or maihalan tulad ka siya. Mailahan tulad natin siya. Characterized by objectiveness, okay? In which only the real or factual, not the emotional or cognitive existence of the object matters greatly to the researcher, okay? So quantitative research is scientific and experimental. There is a step to be taken in order for you to arrive in a certain definite and a certain exact result later on at the end of your research. Where am I? Nah, so here am I. Okay, pagamayon ko lang my face. Okay, you just do not identify problems but theorize, hypothesize, analyze, infer, and create as well, right? So in quantitative research, usually it happens in hard sciences like physics, chemistry, biology, medicine, right? So, amo ng quantitative research class. You just do not identify the problems, but you theorize, okay? You create theory, you hypothesize, magamba kita hypothesize, you answer question na, and you want to prove it using your research. You analyze, you infer, and create as well. So amo na nakatabo na siya sa mga physics, chemistry, biology, and medicine. Qualitative research in soft sciences such as humanities, social sciences, education, and psychology, among others. So here are some classifications of quantitative research. There are two kinds of quantitative research. First is the experimental and the non-experimental. So let's go and discuss each classification. Now let's see what is experimental research. Balhin ko na yung kontura so that you'll see the text. Experimental research has subtypes, namely true experimental, single subject, pre-experimental, and quasi-experimental. And under quasi-experimental, we have also three methods that we can actually use to conduct and to make this quasi-experimental research. First, we have matched comparative group, then time series, then counterbalanced quasi-experimental. In non-experimental research, we also have some types, okay, some subtypes. Namely, we have survey, historical, observational, correlational, descriptive, and comparative research. So basically, mga non-experimental research na nga obrahon in this subject, right? Because it will be so hard for you if you conduct an experimental research when you are far away from each other. So let's just focus on non-experimental research. So what is the importance of a quantitative research? The importance of quantitative research lies greatly in the production of results, right? So you need to come up with a result later on that should reflect precise measurement and an in-depth analysis of data. There will be a part in your quantitative research in which you are required to interpret the result, okay? So I think that would be on chapter 5. So that is quantitative research. You are required to conduct to produce an exact result, and this result will be reflected from your precise measurement. Okay, so numbers, magamba kita measurement, and of course, along with these numbers, you have to interpret it. Okay, using of course your own interpretation of data. Okay. Pero not your own personal bias, okay? It will be stated later on before you interpret the result. It is also useful in obtaining an objective understanding of people, things, places, and events in this world, meaning attaching accurate or exact meanings to objects or subjects, rather than inflated meanings resulting from the researcher's bias or personal attachment to things related to the research. So as what I've said, we have repeated it a lot of times already. It needs or it obtains an exact measurement, okay? An objective understanding of whatever it is that interests you the most, which is the subject of your study. Requiring the use of reliable measurement instruments or statistical methods would be very great later on as you conduct your quantitative research, because it enables people to study their surroundings as objective as they can. All right? So, so gagamit kita statistical methods. Later on, we're also going to discuss about statistical methods like z-test, and a lot of things, okay? This kind of research, quantitative research, is likewise an effective method to obtain information about specified personality traits of a group, okay? Of a group member or of the group as a whole, as regards the extent of the relationship with their characteristics, right? And the reason behind the instability of some people's characteristics. So this can all be a subject of your quantitative research. You want to study people, right? The traits of people as for example, if they are grouped as a whole and if they are individually studied, okay? So that is quantitative research. You want to get their characteristics about something, their personality toward a thing. Okay, so here are some things that we have to remember about the difference between qualitative and quantitative research. Mental survey of reality, okay, so when it comes to the mental survey of reality, sa qualitative research results from social interaction. So that's why before I have class, they observe people and they interpret interactions using words, ideas, and opinions. That is in qualitative research. And in qualitative research, um, it does not really require close-ended questions. Magamba kita close-ended questions. Inabla mga questions, class nga, are only answerable by yes or no, or it has a definite answer. Like for example, sa mga checklist na are you satisfied with the school's service, or are you satisfied with the school's canteen service, for example, amo na. So i-check mo na dabe satisfied, not satisfied, moderately satisfied, satisfied, highly satisfied, or very satisfied. Okay? So amo na class, for example, amo na class ang mga closed-ended questions, inang may definite answers. However, and that is mostly used in quantitative research, all right? And that is not present in qualitative research, because in qualitative research, that focuses more on open-ended questions. In a black class, ang mga questions that could have different answers, okay? Coming from different perspectives and coming from different people. For example, ginpamangkot ka in qualitative research, how satisfied are you in the school canteens services, for example? So in qualitative research, you could answer that I'm not satisfied with the services. You could answer in sentences, in paragraphs, in phrases, all right? And give your own personal opinion about it. However, in quantitative research class, for example, among to, ginaparate ka lang, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? Because that is a close-ended question. I hope you understand. Next, quantitative research. Let's talk about survey of reality. Quantitative research exists in the physical world. Cause-effect relationships explained by people's objective desires. All right. In quantitative revealed by automatic descriptions of circumstances or conditions. All right. So there are a lot of things present here. For example, expressions of data analysis. Researchers' involvement with the object or subject of the study. Okay, does the researcher involve himself or herself in the study, especially on the object or the subject of the study? In qualitative research, it's subjective. So it means that sometimes the researcher could personally engage on the object or the subject of the study. Okay. However, in quantitative research, it has a least involvement by the researcher or no involvement at all. Okay. So sometimes respondents lang gitang ga-answer. Expression of data analysis and findings, verbal language. Okay, so you have to remember that verbal language lang ang ginagamit in qualitative research, words, visuals, and objects. Okay, so that is how you craft and how you make your qualitative research. In quantitative research, it's numerals and statistics. Okay, so when we talk about numerals and statistics, okay, so it deals with numbers and everything else. Research plan. So how do we plan both types of research. Qualitative, it takes place as the research proceeds gradually. In quantitative, it plans all research aspects before collecting data. All right. So in qualitative class, for example, you encounter during the development of your research in qualitative research, um, you encounter you needed another person for you to satisfy the question of your study. So you can add another person. However, in quantitative research class, it's not how it goes. Dapat at the very beginning of your study, you have already planned out what will happen as you progress along with your study, right? So before you collect your data, you have already in mind the types of respondents that you want to get data from, right? Or you have the location in which you can conduct your study or your research. So that is quantitative. You have all the research plan ahead of time. Next, behavior toward research and aspects of condition. Desires to preserve the natural setting of research features, that's qualitative, and quantitative control or manipulation of research conditions by the researcher. So, ang ginatawag natin, usually masulod na ang experimental research, wherein there is a control group, okay, and then experimental group at the other side. Obtaining knowledge. How do we obtain knowledge when qualitative? It's multiple methods. However, in quantitative, it's scientific method. It's step-by-step process. Next, purpose. What is the purpose of qualitative study? It is to make social intentions understandable. So as what I've said earlier, it is to explain things around us, and it is for us to have a deeper explanation of the things that are happening around us. However, in quantitative, it evaluates objective and examines cause-effect relationship. Okay, so basically, it evaluates, it tests, it challenges existing theories, or even it creates its own theories. That's in quantitative research. Data analysis technique, thematic codes, competence-based. That's in qualitative. Thematic codes, inakalakas ang uh, and recurring patterns na ginatawag natin. For example, you try to interview a lot of people. For example, a group of high school learners who got pregnant during their grade 9 years in junior high school. So you group them, then you interview them, okay, and you try to find out from your questions, for example, mga questions mo, what motivated you to get pregnant or what caused you to get pregnant? Okay? And do you have any problems at home? Do you have any problems at school? If these questions will be thrown to this group of learners, okay, or informants, by the way, we call the people involved in the study informants, okay, sa qualitative, and in quantitative, we call them respondents, okay? So if these informants in qualitative research answer these questions, so you try to decode some themes, okay, or some consistent or the same themes coming from their answer or patterns. For example, ang ilabi answer when you ask them if they have problems at home, they will say financial problem. So 3 of them answered financial problems. Okay? So you try, that's a thematic code already. Okay? Kaya that's ginkuha mo na ang theme or recurring pattern halin sa mga ginpang-answers ng respondents mo or sa informants mo, I mean, in qualitative. In quantitative, is mathematically based methods in data analysis. Okay? So magamba kita data analysis naman niya, you try to, amot sa ginambal natin in quantitative, there is a certain may weight or may meaning ang mga numbers, alright, they have certain interpretation later on when you analyze your data after you conduct your study. Okay, so that is in quantitative research. The style of expression, personal and lacks formality, that's in qualitative, and impersonal and scientific or systematic, that's in quantitative. Okay? Impersonal and scientific. So magamba kita, I have one professor when I was in college. She conducted her study, okay, or she had a study about the rape victims, okay, the rape victims of um, men who used illegal drugs. Okay? So, ang iyak, that was a qualitative study. Okay? So, ang ginubraya ko, no, ginpangkaduan ng isa-isa ang mga rape victims sa ilang balay and then interviewed them and asked them some questions. Okay? So, that's actually much personal. Kaya ginakaduan mo, gid. And then you try to, ang iba pa ng ganang class ng qualitative study, they try to immerse themselves in a community. So I don't know if you have some idea already of some researchers who really go to a certain place. For example, they want to live among or with uh, a certain ethnic group. For example, mga ate. So ga-start to sila for a month, for 2 years, or for a year dito sa lugar sang ate. Okay? Just for them to have the idea of what it really feels and what it really looks like if they are in the location or in the context of the people na ginastudihan nila. So that's very personal. Okay, so amo ng qualitative. Okay, that could be the subject of qualitative study. In quantitative na, it's impersonal. Sometimes nga ginahatag talang na ang mga papel, right? And then you let them answer or survey na ginapa-answer natin online. Okay? So, sampling technique. In qualitative, it's more inclined to purposive sampling or use of other chosen samples based on some criteria. Okay? So, the researcher has the freedom to choose along the way if what is the sampling or technique na iya gamiton. Okay? Sampling technique na, for example, mangita kasing imo nga respondents. Right? In qualitative research, if your subject, para sa ginambal ko kagina, mga imo study is about the rape victims of Iloilo, for example, okay? So, you have no other informants, okay, but the rape victims lang, right? So, mangita kagidya sa mga rape victims. Alright? So, amo na ang magambang kita sampling technique. Hindi ka man pwede ka pinagusto lang miskin hindi siya be rape victim ipa-subject mo sa or himuon mo siya informant sa study mo, alright? In quantitative research, ya class, random sampling is the most preferred. Okay? So you can just choose among among people. For example, sa eskwelahan, for example, pero magamba kita nga random sampling. Pero dapat may may identified ka man na set of people nga imo lang kandakan sa study. For example, what is the most preferred subject of the senior high school students of John B. Lacson, of the grade 11 high school maritime students of John B. Lacson, Arevalo, for example, amo na. So, in quantitative research, pwede ka maka-conduct random sampling. Okay? So, pwede ka nga hindi mo tanan pagdalon. Di ba kay tanan sila, grade 11 man. So you can just get samples of respondents coming from the senior high school grade 11 using random sampling. Mapili ka lang, alright? Unlike sa kung qualitative mo gamitin niya, so of course dapat tanan gina sila because all of them are students, okay? Okay, kung sa mga rape victims naman gamito nato ang quantitative to, ang ginamba ko ginang study about sa rape, okay? So you can just, may mga rape victims ka nga napili, then i-random sampling mo lang na sila, mapili ka lang kung sino yung interviewon or tagaan sa imo nga paper, for example, or imo on respondent sa imo study. That is what we call random sampling. Alright, so I think that's the end of lesson 2. Please stand by and I will send the link for lesson 3. I hope that you learned something about the discussion of quantitative research. Now, I want you to go to your M rooms and answer the assessment part of your of this lesson. Okay, Unit 1, Lesson 2, entitled quantitative research, there is an assessment part there in your module. Okay, so please answer that. That's only 1 to 5. That's so easy. Okay, and as I have told you already, I have let you identify already the 3 possible research titles that you can have, okay, that you will conduct later on in this subject. So please meet with your group mates, right, or have a meeting with your group mates and decide what is the final research title, okay, that you will pass to me, right? Because I will check it and I will verify it if there are some changes that you need to make on that. So we are going to make it, right? So thank you and have a nice day. All right, in the previous video that I have sent to you, we discussed about quantitative research. That was for lesson 2, right? And here on this video, we're going to tackle about the 2 types of quantitative research, which are experimental and non-experimental research. Hopefully, we could tackle 3 lessons for 1 video only. All right, so I'm just gonna, we're only going to make this fast so that you're not going to watch a very long video, since we only have limited time to spare for us to watch videos, because I know that you have a lot of things to do pa, like to answer your modules and to answer your activities. Now let's go to the topic already. So we're going to talk about experimental research. This is lesson 3 already, so I hope whatever it is, class, that you can see on this PowerPoint presentation are also the details that you can read and you can learn from your module in MRooms. All right, so I just made a PowerPoint presentation so that you will have a better understanding and a better view of the things from your module, and to be converted through a video that I have made like this one. All right, so experimental research. So basically, an experimental research class, it is a type of a research that seeks to discover if one variable causes a change on another variable, or one variable causes another variable, right? So that's just experimental research from the root word itself, experiment, right? Because so in research, we will encounter a lot of, or we can do a lot of experiments for us to arrive on a certain answer of the question that we have formulated. So we're going to read this one. Experimental, I'm just going to I'm going to transfer myself here so that you will have a better view of the text. Experimental research is a quantitative research that treats or deals with the object or subject of the research in a definite or exact manner, right? So as what I said, this is a quantitative research, so it must be definite and exact, using numbers, numerical values, or exact manner. And experimental research determines the extent of the effects or influence of the treatment on the object or subject. Okay, there is the word treatment, everybody. So when we talk about treatment, it means nga daw may gin involve nga outside na outside nga bagay, all right, or outside nga thing. Okay, or we can call it intervention. Okay, influence of the treatment on the subject or on the object. Alright, so dogin, kumbaga, dogin lapatan siya, wala sang corresponding nga force or corresponding nga iban nga bagay. Okay, so that you'll see if there is an influence or effect. Okay, then after that, you discover the cause of such effect. We might want to know, in a experimental research examples, we might want to know, does a particular type of therapy, for example, can cause someone to decrease depression? So, mo na experimental research class. So may type of therapy, then ang level of depression, alright? So, ginaano na class, gina-measure na so that you'll see if there is a change or not. Or for example, does a particular teaching strategy of a teacher, for example, improve the learning of a student, all right? Or does violence and trauma, for example, can cause fresh cadet to shift career, right? So mga amo na class. So ang mga object or ang mga subjects sa imong study, you try to experiment them, all right, using certain interventions or treatment. Okay, there are two classifications of experimental research, all right? So there are two groups that are involved in any experimental research, all right, class? So you just have to remember that there are only two groups involved in an experimental research. The first one is the experimental group, the one on which the treatment or influence is applied, all right? The control group or does not receive any treatment. So experimental group and control group only. All right. So based on where the experimental research is done, it can be classified as laboratory research or those researches that are done in a certain location or a certain laboratory, so that other people would not be able to intervene to that, or the outside forces, okay, will not be able to intervene, okay, will not be able to be affected of the research, and the research could be affected as well. Field research, all right, so in the open field, all right, so you can do experimental research in the location that your research requires. Your manner of selecting the participants, all right, indicates whether it is true experimental or quasi-experimental. Later on, we're going to talk about true experimental and quasi-experimental. The true experimental research absolutely uses random selection in determining who among the participants should compose the experimental group or the control group. All right. So in the true experimental class, there is really an absolute, all right, random selection. It's randomly selected. Okay, ang ibutang mo sa experimental group or sa control group mo as the subject or the object of your study could be randomly selected. Okay, so ang A or B, for example, okay, A and B ang imo variables, then ang A and B, you can just select anyone there to be the participant, okay, or to be in the experimental group or the control group. However, in the quasi-experimental class, that's not the case. The quasi-experimental research adopts a comparative technique in choosing the subjects, all right? All right, so that could be the difference between quasi-experimental and true experimental research. All right, we're going to go in depth. Okay, we're going to discuss more about quasi-experimental later on. So let's look at first the research design of an experimental research. Any plan you have about an experimental research must have the following aspects that take place in a sequential manner. First, specify the problem or topic of your research. In any research, may it be experimental or non-experimental, you really have to specify the problem or the topic of your research, okay? Or the thing that you want to solve or you want to discover in your research, okay? Then formulate the research problem or hypothesis, okay? So when we talk about problem or topic, it does not necessarily mean that it really has to be your problem, okay? Or your specific problem. Okay? So may topic ka, you have to, for example, education yung mga topic, all right? So topic mo, education here. Then you have to narrow it down to the certain extent in which you can find a loophole or a problem about what you want to know about education. For example, so education ang topic mo. So, what about education? Okay? So, pangita ka problem. So, you have to have a research problem about education. For example, you want to know, why do students have problems in online classes? Okay? So, that could be a research problem about education. Okay? Because, of course, it's related to education. Then, formulate as well your hypothesis. Okay, your hypothesis will be what could be the answer, could be the answer. Okay, so this is kumbaga the vision. Okay, the vision that you have for this question. What could be the problems of the online students? Okay, or the students in the online classes. Okay, magamba kita hypothesis class, dugin answer mo na siya balaanay. And you still need to prove it using your research. All right. Number 3, determine the dependent and independent variable. All right. So you have to determine your dependent and independent variable, because knowing your dependent and independent variable will give you the idea of who receives the treatment and who stays to be in the base form of your experiment. All right, inang wala siya ma-receive na treatment. Okay, so that's dependent and independent variable. Then select the participants or your subjects or your respondents. So you really have to have that. So as you can see, it's a research design. It's very specific. It's systematic. Okay, that's why research is systematic and scientific. Let's go to the next one. Number 5, decide on the specific type of experimental research, meaning whether it will be a true experimental or quasi-experimental. Conduct the experiment, then collect, analyze, and interpret the results. In conducting an experimental research, first class, you have to give a pretest to examine the initial condition of both groups in relation to a variable. So magamba kita nga pretest, you give a pretest before you conduct your experiment. Okay? Before. Alright? So, amo pa na di klase nga wala ka pa may ginhatag ng mga intervention, wala ka pa may ginhatag na treatment. So, before mo na siya, para mabalaan mo gid kung ano ang ilang state or estado nila before mo gigandak ang research. In condition of both groups in relation to a variable, condition, or factor. Second, apply to the control group a new condition. So, sa control group ka class, dira kaghatag sa imo nga intervention or sa imo nga condition or sa imo nga treatment. And the third one, you give the latter group a post-test to determine the effects or influence of the treatment or condition applied on them. Okay, so atong gintagaan sa treatment or sa intervention or sa new condition, you have to give a post-test to determine kung may effects and may influence giman ang treatment mga ginhatag. So you compare the result from pre-test and post-test for you to determine the effects or the results of your study or your treatment. All right, next. Here are there are many ways of letting a variable or a factor or condition intervene or have an application on the subjects, and of later determining the effects of such intervention. Here are some of these methods. Ngayon, pwede natin magamit on how we're able to conduct and to give intervention. First, we can create or we can do treatment evaluation. All right? Or pre-test and post-test of multiple treatments or conditions. The first one is we also called it as ex post facto, all right? Or after the fact, meaning evaluation comes after the treatment, all right? So we can only evaluate it after we have given the treatment, okay? So we can call it as ex post evaluation, all right? Okay, let me see if I can actually put We can call it as ex post facto, all right? Or the treatment evaluation that we give after the treatment is already done. All right, so just like this, just, all right? See, tanda sa akong may text na. All right, number 2, pre-test or post-test of multiple treatments or condition. Multiple treatment, on the other hand, all right, makes you apply on the subjects. Not just one, but also varied treatment methods like using book, kaya maka-use ka book, interview, or social networking. You resort to this method when you want to discover the extent of student learning by means of these sources of data. All right? All right, so we're here now at quasi-experimental research. But before we discuss the different types of quasi-experimental research, I think it's best for us to know first what could be the difference of true experimental research from quasi-experimental research, or true experiment from quasi-experiment. All right, so a quasi-experiment here, this one, is designed a lot like experiment or a true experiment, all right? Dugin design kasi ang the person true experiment, except that in the quasi-experimental design, the participants are not randomly assigned to experimental groups. As what I said earlier, they cannot be disintegrated. Hindi sila pwede makuha in quasi-experiment because they have their own unique, or they have their unique characteristics, okay, that cannot be controlled or cannot be altered, cannot be given an intervention by the researcher. In a true experiment, all right, research participants have an equal chance, okay? Ang tanan nga participants have an equal chance of being assigned to any condition of the independent variable. Okay, di ba ang independent variable ang manang ginakontrol sa aton nga researcher, okay, or kamo nga researcher, this is the one being manipulated by the researcher that is involved in the study. All right? So for instance, ako being researcher, if I'm the researcher and I am examining the effects of playing Mobile Legends on the eyesight, okay, I can randomly assign participants to one of three independent variable conditions. Abi tatlo lang ka participants ang akon nga need, all right? So I'll assign each participant to any, okay, of variable conditions, okay? Independent variable conditions. Abi ang variable condition ko is letter A, those who play 2 hours of Mobile Legends. Then next, letter B would be 4 hours of playing Mobile Legends. Then the third one, or letter C, would be no playing hours. So wala gahampang. So tatlo na sila, 2 hours, 4 hours, and 3 hours. And then, 2 hours, 4 hours, and don't play at all. Wala siya gampang. And then, I can assess their each of these persons' eyesight following the exposure to the independent variable. So, ginpahampang ko sila sang Mobile Legends. Then, after that, ginmeasure ko ila eyesight. Okay? In a true experiment, each participant, okay, who volunteered would have an equal chance of being assigned to any of the 3 groups. Abi, ang akon groups B, para itong ginambag ko, A, B, C. 2 hours, 4 hours, no, don't play at all. Okay? So, amo na tatlo na sila A, B, C. Then, tatlo na akong participants. So, 1, ma-assign ko sa letter A. Ang 2, i-assign ko sa letter B. Ang 3, i-assign ko sa letter C. Or, ang number 3, assign ko sa A, 2 hours. Ang letter B, ang number 2, i-assign ko sa letter B or sa letter C, pwede man. And ang number 3, assign ko sa letter B, any. Okay, random lang. Okay, pag gusto kay, it does not affect the result. Okay, kay tanan man sila, gahampang mo, tanan man sila, wala sila sang unique characteristics. Okay? So, pwede ko sila tanan ma-assign in any of these three nga independent variable. However, in quasi-experiment class, that's not the case. A quasi-experiment are employed or is employed when the researcher is interested in independent variables that cannot be randomly assigned. Okay? So, ang letter A, B, and C mo to, hindi mo na siya ma-assign, miskin kay sino lang. Kag hindi mo matagaan na respondents, no miskin sino lang. Okay? So, that is in quasi-experiment. Usually, this happens when the independent variable in question is something that is an innate characteristic. Okay? Or if mo ginapangita mo ginang innate nga characteristic nga unique sa isa ka tawo, okay, of the participants involved. Example, here's an example of a simple quasi-experimental design that will help you see the difference between a true experiment and a quasi-experiment. For example, ako abi is I'm a personality expert that I study ako about sa impact sa personality traits sa intelligence. Alright? So, ang impact sa personality traits sa intelligence. For the purpose of my current research project, I am interested nga hibaloon, okay, or examine ang IQ scores of people, okay, or ang participants who score highly in each of the big 5 personality factors. Okay, so what are these big 5 personality factors na ginambal ko kuno abi lang? Okay, first is aggressiveness, then shyness, ikaduwa, confidence, fear, okay, and happiness. For example, mo ng mga personality, okay, personality traits, or aggressive, shy, confident, fearful, and happy. So each of these 5 personality factors are quasi-independent variable. Okay, so they are quasi-independent variable. Innate sila sa tao, kay personality sila characteristics. So personality traits are inherent, natural sa tao, and could be unique to each person. So random assignment cannot be used. So hindi natin mag-use ang random assignment. So participants would initially be assigned to groups based on their personality assessment score across each of the 5 personality factors. Okay? So pwede natin class ma-assign so pwede natin ma-assign for example so hindi lang kita kapag gusto assign sa mga tao nga will undergo an IQ test later on. Okay? Kay each person gani class has a unique characteristic and it's inherent. Okay? So ang uraw naton, participant would initially be assigned to groups based on their personality assessment score across each of the 5 personality factors. Abi pila ka bilog abi 25 abi imong participants. Okay? So ang 5, okay, they have higher nga score or ang personality nila gasyo nga they have higher score on aggressiveness. Okay? So that's one group. Okay? So ang tanan nga high sa may aggressiveness ipamutang mo to. Abi 5 sila kabilog. Okay? So that's letter A. Then letter B sa naman sa personality naman nga shy or mahuluyon shyness. Okay, may 5 naman class nga nagtaas to score. So dito sila nga 5. Alright? So you cannot randomly assign person kung sino lang kwaon mo kag ipamutang-mutang to sa each of the quasi independent variable. Okay? So hindi na pwede nga pang-assign mo lang na sila. You have to identify first if what group they belong in before you can conduct your IQ test or your test to know that if there is really an impact of just really an impact in intelligence according to personality test. Alright? So now that I have, for example, my group assignments, abi na pang-assign ko na sila. So 5 to sa shyness, 5 sa happiness, 5 sa 5 to ka big factors, I can now examine the impact that personality factors may have on intelligence. So hindi ko na sila matagaan sang test man nga gusto ko ihatag. Alright? So if a true experimental design were used here, Each participant would be randomly assigned to each personality group, regardless whether or not they possess those personality traits, which would not address my question gid sa una-una pa lang nga what was my question, for example, my question would have been, do personality have an impact on intelligence? Okay, so it will not be answered if that is the case. All right, so I hope you understood what is the difference between true experiment and quasi-experiment. Next, okay, so let's discuss okay, butang pagamayon ko naman self ko class for me man. Right? So quasi-experimental research. Usually, participants chosen in a quasi-experimental research are those forming a class that remains as one group incapable of disintegration, as what I said, right? So they cannot be just randomly assigned, okay? They cannot be disintegrated. The not randomly chosen participants are subjected to any of these types of quasi-experimental research. Number one, matched comparison, choosing a treatment group and another group that has similarities with the treatment group. Number two, time series quasi-experimental research, giving them series of pre-test and post-test. Then number three, single subject quasi-experimental research or controls treatment and conditions applied to just one individual or a group. Right? So those are some types of quasi-experimental research. So I guess we're done with experimental research. So now let's proceed to the next one, the lesson 4, non-experimental research. So now we're here in lesson 4, or non-experimental research. We have discussed experimental research in the previous minutes of the video. So we're going to proceed to non-experimental research, and this is going to be lesson 4. Non-experimental research is a way of finding out truths about a subject by describing the collected data about such subject and determining their relationships or connections with one another, right? So basically, this is just finding truth and describing the collected data about the subject, and you are actually determining the relationships or connection with one another. So any treatment or condition is not involved in this type of research. So on this research, treatment or condition, as what we usually do in the experimental research, it's not present in the non-experimental research, because as what I said, we only are trying to describe and finding truths about a subject, okay, in non-experimental research. But there is also a measuring of variables here, okay? So do not put in mind that we do not have a number here, because numerical values are still present on this type of research because it's under quantitative. And as what we've said, quantitative deals with numbers. Once you do a non-experimental research, you also deal with both qualitative and quantitative research, or data, not research, just data. Because you have quantitative data, you have numerical data. Sorry, hindi ko masyado kambal. I have a singaw, dako-dako. As what you have noticed. Okay. Medyo dako siya. However, in quantitative, when we talk about non-experimental research, there is a quantitative data present. Okay? Oh my God, sorry, I was not able to. Yes, here, non-experimental, alam mo na. Okay, kagin basa ko. Okay, just read it first before we proceed, or pause this one before we proceed. All right. Now let's continue. Non-experimental research has a qualitative and quantitative data. Quantitative deals with numbers and qualitative deals with explanations or words. All right? Kumbaga, this could actually be a combination of words and numbers, right? Your desire to discover people's thoughts, views, feelings, and attitude about a certain societal issue, object, or place or event causes you to use non-experimental research. And in non-experimental research, there is a presence of quantitative data and, of course, qualitative data. Let's proceed to characteristics of non-experimental research. So there are experimental research. I'm just gonna put myself here. Right, so there are characteristics of non-experimental research. It is incapable of establishing cause and effect relationships. By itself, it is able. It takes place in conjunction with other experimental and quasi-experimental research methods. All right, so it involves various ways of data analysis. So you can analyze your data using or involving these ways. Primary analysis of data collected by the researcher himself, right? So that is actually what we call primary data analysis. Secondary is the examination of data collected by other people, by books, by reviews, by other types of literary or by other types of literature that could actually be used as secondary data analysis for data analysis. Letter C, meta-analysis, analysis of data expressed numerically. Okay, so there are some ways of data analysis. So here are the three. Number three, it uses research method that applicable to both quantitative and qualitative data. So we can say that non-experimental research, even though it's under quantitative research, it could still actually, it could qualify to be a mixed method research in which there is quantitative and qualitative ways of discovering things or explaining things. Now, now let's go to survey research. Research could actually be a non-experimental research. This one could actually be your method later on when you conduct your quantitative research, all right? Because as what I said in the previous discussions that we had, since it is impossible for us to meet face-to-face and to meet with our respondents personally, so we could actually just conduct research online and just send the survey to them, okay, through online platforms. Actually, we were instructed that we are not going to teach you how to make or how to have a good and a correct format for a research instrument. We were instructed to just teach you about how to use Google Forms, right? So Google Forms is going to be one platform for us to utilize for the conduct of your study, because you really need to produce a whole quantitative research at the end of the semester. So survey research is a method of research that aims at knowing what a big number of people think and feel about some sociological issues. Okay, so survey research, as what we've said, it deals with sociological issues. It deals with society, right? How others think, how others act, right? And the feeling towards something in their environment, in their atmosphere. The data it collects from these people serving as representatives or informants explain or describe the society's thoughts, as what I said, attitudes and feelings towards environmental issues. Many immediately come to think of survey research the moment they hear or read the expression non-experimental research, all right? This is because survey research is the most used non-experimental research in the field of sociology, okay? Because it deals, as what I said, with society, psychology, and humanities. Inquiries, investigations, and experiments also happen in this type of non-experimental research. But in terms of types and analysis of data, survey research follows a standard that is applicable to social sciences. You can actually use this quantitative method in pursuing to get the answers from the research questions you come up. All right? Although survey research is a very old research technique, it's very old. It has been used already ever since time immemorial. I do not know. It began in the period of the ancient Egyptian rulers. Many still consider this type of technique or research technique as a very popular means of social inquiry. Okay, the ones that you use, wala class, as what you can see in your grade 11, the grade 12 students were able to go to your classrooms and give you some questionnaires, data questionnaires, that could actually be one type of a survey research or a survey technique, research technique. Purposes of a survey research. First, to obtain, I'm just going to put myself here once again so that the text will be clear. To obtain information about people's opinions and feelings about an issue. To identify present condition, needs, or problems of people in a short span of time. So, mga klas ginambal ko bala in identifying your statement of the problem or your topic that you are going to work on for this subject as your research, you have to identify the present condition. What could be the present condition nowadays? All right? What could be the needs or problems of people today, and even in a short period of time? That could actually be related to maritime. Okay? So you can actually create or you can do a study about the impact of online learning, for example, in the maritime, in the oral communication, for example, in the oral communication skills of John B. Lacson of grade 11 maritime, high school maritime students of JBLFMU Arevalo. Okay, so that could actually be a title already. That could be a maritime related, of course, because you are, these grade 11 high school maritime students are taking maritime courses or subjects, okay? Specifically, oral communication. So in that manner, if that could be your problem and that could be your title, you could actually just get the grades of these grade 11 respondents of yours, their grade from oral oral communication, okay? And you can analyze it, okay, as quantitative data, okay, to become the result or to become the details or the data of your research study, right? Survey research is, the purpose of it is to seek answers to social problems. Number 4, to give school officials pointers on curricular offerings, guidance, counseling services, teacher evaluation, and so on. So, as what you can see, class, let me just share to you, ang mga university, like John B., ang aton nga school, they actually have a research program, okay, sa mga teachers, sa mga employees nila. For example, hatag sila sa research problem. They need, or an employee needs to make a research every 2 years, for example. Okay, in that manner, ang research class could actually help how to improve the lives of, or the current state or condition of a school, okay, as what it is said here, to give school officials pointers on curricular offerings, for example. So, muna class, abi ma-study ang isa ka empleyado sa dyan, bibi ang teacher, on the difficulties encountered by senior high school students in maritime English, for example. So in that manner, if the difficulties are identified, it can be addressed and it can be given solution. So in that manner, research is very helpful. Now, DepEd on the other spectrum could actually use research for them to know about the subjects that they need to offer, or the subjects that, or the revision in the curriculum that they need to make in order for the curriculum to be still effective among the learners of the Philippines, or in the Filipino learners. So in that manner, research is actually used. Planning a survey research. The research design of a survey research is similar to that of the experimental research, only that when it comes to data collection method, ay nabalang collection data and instrument as well, survey research goes through the following phases. Number 1, explanation of objectives clearly. Number 2, formulation of research questions or hypotheses to predict relationship of variables. Number 3, determination of the exact kind of data referred 2 by the hypothesis or research questions. Let me just make my a little smaller. All right. Next, assurance of the population or group of people to which the findings will be applied to. Just wait for a while. I'm having some problems. All right. Finalization of the sampling method for selecting the participants and identification of the method or instrument in collecting data. All of this class would actually be discussed to you in details later on as we progress with our lesson. Okay, what are some strengths of survey research? Stressing the effectiveness and usefulness of survey research, Scott gives the following pluses of survey research. Why is it effective? First, versatility. We have versatility. So what is versatility in research? It can tackle in any issue affecting society. So that's versatile. Efficiency. It is not costly in terms of money and time, assuming there is excellent communication or postal system na ginagamit. Generality, it can get a good representation or sample of a large group of people. Confidentiality, it is capable of safeguarding the privacy or anonymity of respondents. Right, next. Here are the weak points of survey research appearing in several books about this type of quasi-experimental research. It cannot provide sufficient evidence about the relationships of variables. It cannot examine the significance of some issues affecting people's social life. So this is just a type of survey, but it does not have any interpretation. So that's why you let the qualitative method or qualitative aspect of your research come into the picture in order for your data from the survey research that you have done to be interpreted. Next, it cannot get reflecting the effects of the interconnectedness of environmental features on the research study. It cannot consider man's naturalistic tendencies as the basis of human behavior unless his ways or styles of living are related to his surroundings. It cannot promote interpretive and creative thinking unless its formation of ideas results from scientific thinking, and it also cannot have an effective application to all topics of research. Right, next. It cannot as well used as in questioning or coding method that can accurately register differences among the participants' responses. It cannot diffuse domain researchers' abilities to control and manipulate some factors affecting the study, and it cannot account for real or actual happenings, but can give ideas or on respondents' views, beliefs, concepts, and emotions. Okay, so what are some ethical and principles and rules in survey research? Okay, and even in research as a whole or in general. Number one, you are in a higher education institution. You're in a university. You're in John B. College or university that always considers academic excellence as its number one goal. Be academically competent by producing excellent research paper that will mirror not only your intellectual abilities but your valuing system as well. Okay? In John B, we have a lot of good researchers here. Okay? Considering the importance of honesty and integrity in conducting a research paper, keep in mind the following ethical principles and rules in producing an honest-to-goodness research paper. Number one, respect whatever decision a person has about your research work for his participation in your study comes solely from his or her own decision-making powers. Sometimes a researcher could actually tap or can actually ask for help from other people to answer their research. And you cannot expect them, or their respondents, you cannot expect them to really to go beyond what you have asked them to do. Okay? For example, you want them to make a product out of the questionnaires that you have given. If the respondents do not want to make the product, so you're gonna force them to do it. Okay, so find another respondent. Make sure that your study will be instrumental, number 2, in elevating the living conditions of people around you or in bringing about world progress. So make sure that your research has this thing in mind, that the progress and the development of the society, or it can actually add to the body of knowledge. Okay. Next, conduct your research work in a way that the respondents will be safe from any injury or damage that may arise from their physical and emotional involvement in the study. Okay, so respect and make sure that you have to make sure that your respondents are in a safe place or condition whenever they have an involvement in your study. Practice honesty and truthfulness in reporting about the result of your study. Some researchers actually manipulate their data because they do not want the result of their study. Okay, they did not expect to come out with the result of their study. That's why they manipulate data. Whatever it is that you have discovered, or whatever it is that your research has resulted to, you have to respect it and you have to be true to it. You have to be genuine to it. Report or interpret the data that has come your way. Do not alter anything, because it will actually tell much about your integrity and honesty as a researcher. So maybe, kung nag-technical ka and you manipulated the data, the next researches that you're going to make, it will not be reliable and valid at all. Accept the reality that the nature, kind, and extent of responses to your questions depend solely on the dispositions of the respondents. You cannot force them to answer the questions or to give answers the way you want it to be. Okay? So that is what you really need to remember. Next, decide properly which information should go public or secret. All right? So if your respondent has some discretion on what to keep private and what is to be publicized, you have to respect it and you have to do it, because that's not your information in the first place. Okay? Stick to your promise of safeguarding the secrecy of some information you obtain from the respondent. So, diba, we have a law in research. Okay? Later on, we will discuss about it. We have a law in research that states that a researcher could not give or could not disclose any information about the respondents, okay, and their response to the questions or to the details of your study. Okay, so you cannot compromise your research from the identity of your respondents. Okay. All right, so for you to better understand what is non-experimental research and what does it consist, please watch this next video for you to have a better grasp of it.
Hi everybody, I'm Naufal. Today we are going to discuss regarding non-experimental research design. Last class we have discussed regarding research design. In that I have explained in detail regarding experimental research design. So if you're watching this video first time, just go through the video regarding experimental research design so that you'll get an idea regarding research design and different classification of research design. Today we are going to discuss regarding non-experimental research design. So what is meant by non-experimental research design? That is, a researcher is examining the things that is happening naturally. Naturally what is happening? He is just examining, or he is just observing the things in the natural setting. There is no manipulation and there is no control. That is the important thing you have to note. There is no manipulation and there is no control. Manipulation means you are using a outside source. Suppose a patient with pain and you are giving a painkiller injection. That painkiller injection if you are giving means that is manipulation. You are manipulating. So here you are not giving any injection or you are not manipulating. But the researcher is examining the thing that is happening naturally. What is happening is naturally he is examining. That is non-experimental research design. Next we can see the classification of non-experimental research design. The first one is descriptive research design. Descriptive research design. It means the researcher will observe, the researcher will document, and the researcher will describe the things that is happening naturally. There is no manipulation at all. He will observe, he will describe, and he will document the things regarding the severity, regarding the frequency. He will observe the things. For example, a researcher is examining back pain among the nurses who are working in ICU. At a particular or selected hospitals, the back pain among the nurses who are working in ICU, the researcher is examining. But he is not manipulating. He is not giving any medicine. He is just observing the severity as well as the frequency of back pain among the nurses who are working in intensive care unit. Got it? So descriptive research design means the researcher is observing, the researcher is documenting as well as he is describing the things that is happening naturally. Got it? That is descriptive research design. Next one is correlational research design. Correlational means relationship between two things. Is there any relationship between two things? The researcher is examining the phenomena. Is there any relationship between two things? Or else you can say the researcher is examining the cause and effect relationship. Cause as well as effect. Is there any relationship between these two things? I will give you the simple example. Smoking and lung cancer. Is there any relationship between smoking and lung cancer? So the researcher is examining the smokers and is there any chance to generate lung cancer? So he is studying the cause effect relationship. That is correlational research design. Got it? Next one is developmental research design. Developmental research design. That means the researcher is examining a particular thing at a particular point of time. Time is the important thing. Here the time is the important thing. The researcher is examining a particular thing at a particular point of time. Got it? I will give you the example that a researcher is studying the perception of nursing students towards the nursing profession. So at the beginning of the course, the researcher is examining the attitude or the perception of the nurses towards the nursing profession. Till the end he is observing or he is examining the attitude or the perception of the nurses towards the nursing profession. So time is the important thing in developmental research design. He is examining a particular thing at a particular point of time. That is developmental research design. Next one is survey research design. Survey research design. This word is very familiar to you. Survey. What is meant by survey? You are collecting the information from the subjects regarding their opinion, regarding their attitude, regarding their perception towards a particular thing. You are collecting their opinion. You are collecting the data from the subject towards a particular thing. How is their view on that thing? That is survey research design. These are the classifications of non-experimental research design. That is descriptive research design, correlational research design, developmental research design, and survey research design. Got it? That's all regarding non-experimental research design. We will meet soon with another video. Till that, thank you and goodbye.
All right, since we're done with experimental research and non-experimental research, now let's proceed to another topic that will be very essential later on as you conduct and produce your own research paper. This is going to be the discussion about variables, okay? Basically, ang aton gamiton na variables in this in your research paper would be independent and dependent variable. Variables, okay? Basahon tanay so that we'll have an idea of what is it. Variables are changing qualities or characteristics of persons or things like age, gender, intelligence, ideas, achievements, confidence, and so on. And there are a lot of variables that we can actually measure and so on that are involved in your research study. Okay? For instance, as years go by, your age or intelligence increases, right? But placed, gaano man siya, your age and your intelligence increases. So it's gataas siya, right? But placed in a situation where you are afflicted with a disease or have no means of reading or no access to any sources of knowledge, your intelligence tends to decrease, right? So your intelligence has variety, okay? So it's a variable. Made up of the root or base word vary, which means to undergo changes or to differ from. Variables have different or varying values in relation to time and situation. In research, especially in a quantitative research, one important thing that we have to focus on at the start of our study is to determine the variables involved in our study, especially in your study. Unless you spend some time pondering on variables in your research, your work has no chance of attaining its goal. If you cannot identify your variables, your independent and your dependent variables later on, you will really have a great problem coming up with what is your research all about, okay? So it's part of your conceptual framework, okay? The identification of your independent and your dependent variable. Because if it's not for them, your research, you will not have any guide, okay? You will not have any target of what could be your research all about, okay? Your research problem or your research topic naman, to which you devote much of your initial research time, finalizing stands great if it has wordings on the basic variables involved in your study, okay? So if you have a great conceptual framework, if you identified your variables very well, you have a good research problem. So there are basic types of research or of variables, okay? Basically, variables are of two types: independent variables and dependent variables. Now, let's see what is independent and dependent variables. Dependent variables are those that cause changes in the subject, right? It causes changes in the subject. Kumbaga, this could actually be the control nimo nga group, okay? Okay, ang independent variable. While dependent variables are those that bear or manifest the effects caused by the independent variables. Those sila ni class the direct receiver of any actions of the independent variables, okay? Hence, in a causal relationship, the cause comes from the independent variables, right? And the effects would be on the dependent variables. So that is how we differentiate independent and dependent variables. Some researchers, okay, especially students, they will have some problems identifying their independent and dependent variables, okay? It just depends on your research problem, okay? What is your target, okay? What could be what is your hypothesis? Okay, what do you want to achieve with your research? Okay, if you know it, you would know your independent and your dependent variable. In an experimental research, the independent variable as the condition or treatment applied to the experimental group is under the control, direction, or manipulation of the researcher or experimenter. So an independent variable as the condition or treatment applied to the experimental group would all depend on the control sang experimenter or sang researcher, right? So whatever it is yung ginhatag sang independent variable, it all depends on the researcher, okay? So he will see kung anong effects sa may dependent variable. For instance, to determine the positive effects of one modern grammar theory called SFG, or Systematic Functional Grammar, on intercultural competence, or IC, you apply this theory, ang SFG, in varied ways like realizing this in a collaborative, oral, or written activity. Ang mga collaborative, in this case, the SFC serves as the independent variable and the IC as the dependent variable. Okay? Because ang SFC ang imo nga gin intervene bala class, or ang imo nga ginhatag, okay? Or imo gin control. Okay? Then what could be that effect sa imo pag-control sa independent variable mo sa SFC sa intercultural competence sang tawo? Okay? So ang intercultural competence, that would be the dependent variable because the result of the IC or the intercultural competence na dependent variable mo is based from how the independent variable was worked on and was experimented. Alright? So that is what we call independent variable. Variable relationships. In a scientific way of studying cause-effect relationships, these two variables, independent, are part and parcel of the research because the first one is the cause, okay, or the part, ang independent variable. Then the parcel, the second one is the effect that you can subject to any form of measurement. However, as you carry out the research, it is possible that one, two, or more variables or extra variables crop up to create an impact on the relationship between the independent and dependent variables. Kung extra siyang a variable class that would actually help you to identify and to let the independent and the dependent variable work together and to become more effective, we can actually create extra variables and we call them extraneous variables. For example, in the case of SFC versus IC, kagina, the first as the independent variable and the second as the dependent variable that we've discussed, extraneous variables like age, gender, or personality traits may suddenly surface to create effects on the relationships of the two basic variables. Such extraneous variables are called participant variables. If they refer to the moods, emotions, or intelligence of the subject, we can call them situational variables. If they pertain to nature of the place, or magamba kita naman nga situational variables, it could actually pertain to nature of the place, if it's smelly, chilly, cold, hot, spacious, and the like. Extraneous variables are to be controlled by you, the experimenter, but if they do not give in to your control, they become confounding variables that can strongly influence your study. Dealing with these types of variables gives you difficulty in determining the real cause of changes in the dependent variables. That is, whether it is due only the dependent variable or to the combination between the confounding and independent variables. The involvement of confounding variables in the research results in the production of mixed up, confusing, or bewildering results. So be careful with your variables because it can cost you miscommunication and misinterpretation, okay, of your result. Involved not within the research situation but outside the research process, The extraneous variables exist as nuisance variables, whose potency need to go down to prevent it from affecting the results negatively, right? So there are other types of variables which are as follows. May ara pagid iban. Constant. Do not undergo any changes during an experiment. Attribute characteristics of people, intelligence, creativity, anxiety, learning styles. Covariate. Included in the research study to create interactions with the independent and dependent variables. Next, continuous, quantitative in nature and is used in interval or ratio scale of measurement. Next, dichotomous has only two possible results, 1 and 0. Latent cannot be directly observed like personality traits. Manifest can be directly observed to give proofs to latent variables. Exogenous, found outside an identified model. Endogenous, found inside as part of identified model. So I think we're done with the variables. Now, for you to better understand what I mean and what are variables, especially independent and dependent variables, I will be showing a video after I'm done talking. I will be showing a video that will make you learn something about variables that you can actually use later on in your research paper. So here's the video.
To understand more about variables and how they're important in experiments, let's look at this example. Does the amount of sunlight affect the speed of goldfish growth? You decide to test this by purchasing small goldfish and placing them in rooms that receive various amounts of sunlight. The length of the fish will be measured weekly for 6 months. Okay, so here's this experimental setup, and typically in an example like this, they're going to ask you questions like you see below. What's the independent variable? What's the dependent variable? And what are some constants for this experiment? So let's take a look at what those variables really are and see if we can understand the variables and how they affect this goldfish. So if we just listed some things that could affect this goldfish, let's say the type of water would be one. That would affect the goldfish. What else could affect the goldfish? The size of the bowl that the goldfish is in. How about the pH of the water? That's the acid or base level of the water. That's another one. Let's think about, we could do the type of food. The type of food would affect the goldfish. How about the amount of food? That's slightly different. And, you know, thinking about the problem we just talked about, what about the amount of sunlight? The amount of sunlight, does that have an effect? So these are all variables that could have possible effects on this goldfish. So what are we going to study here? You know, if we look back at the question, in the question they're studying, which variable are we studying? We're studying the amount of sunlight. You look here at the top, it says amount of sunlight. So looking at our list, the one variable that's going to be different than the rest, the one that we're going to actually change the amount of, it says in the problem here, we're going to have different amounts of sunlight in the rooms. So the one that's going to be separate from the rest, let's see if I can separate these here. Let's see if I can move that, there we go. So the one that's going to be separate from the rest would be the amount of sunlight. So the amount of sunlight is now independent of the rest. So if you're independent, that means you're by yourself, you are able to take care of yourself, you're set aside, you're independent. So now we have this variable that's different than the rest, the amount of sunlight. All of the other variables in this experiment have to be held constant. These have to be held constant. They cannot change for the experiment, because you're trying to see the effect of just sunlight, not on the other components, not on these other variables. So this amount of sunlight is independent of the rest. And that's the one you're studying. So going back to this question here, what is the independent variable? That would be the amount of sunlight that the fish receives. Again, think of it like this. All of these different variables that could affect a goldfish. The one that you're choosing and taking aside, setting it apart from the rest, is the independent of the rest, and that's called the independent variable. all of the rest have to be held constant. That means they should be the same for all of the fish. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a fair test. And those are called constants. So really what I put here are some constants that could answer the question down here. Now the only other part to talk about that's really important here is the dependent variable. What's the dependent variable? Well, the dependent variable in an experiment depends on the independent variable. That sounds kind of confusing, but here's what I mean by that. You're going to have to measure if there's an effect of the sunlight. Is there effect of the sunlight? We have to measure that somehow. So up here, if you look, we're going to measure the speed of goldfish growth. How fast are those goldfish growing? The rate of growth. And so what I want you to think about for this is that the dependent variable gives you data. The dependent variable, that D sound, think of that with data. It gives you numbers. Okay? And our numbers in this case are the rates of goldfish growth. So that's one way you can break down the different variables in an experiment. Think of all the different variables that can affect something. Think about the one thing, one variable that you're changing, that you're varying for your experiment, and that's going to be the independent variable. And that's the one that's going to be different for all of the groups. So I have different groups of goldfish in different rooms. They have different amounts of light, and what's going to be different here is the amount of sunlight. Each one will have a different amount of sunlight. What are they going to have the same of? What's going to be constant? That's going to be all of these things that we listed. And then finally, the dependent variable, think of dependent, and think of data. Think of that connection between those. That gives you the data, the numbers that you need. Dependent data, dependent data. So that's how you can break it down. You can always look in the experiment. What are we measuring? And that will be the dependent variable. That's what you're measuring. So I hope this little review and this example helped. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Again, thanks for watching, and if you haven't, please subscribe.
All right, since you are done watching the video, I want you to answer the assessment parts of your lesson, of your module, lesson 3, 4, and 5. Okay, my 5 na di class. I want you to answer the assessment part of your module, lesson 3, 4, and 5, and the deadline of it will be on February 21, 2021. Now, those quizzes are actually just 5 items each, okay? So, mga true or false mo lang, the identification and what. So, I hope that you learn something about the video so that you will have answers from it, for it later on, okay? And then I want you, if you are not contented with just watching me discussing about the video, okay, discussing about the research, I want you to read your module in MRoom so that you will have answer and idea later when you answer the quizzes. All right, so thank you so much. We are done discussing lesson 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 for the unit 1. All right, so we could actually continue. You can actually start writing the chapter 1 of your research, but with, of course, with my supervision later on. Okay, you can start actually meeting with your group and asking them if what their opinion is, okay, and asking your group mates if what could be their works for chapter 1, okay, so that the work will be divided among all of you, okay, so that it will not be hard for one person. All right, as what I've said, I want you to list down the names of group mates who are not participating, and I will not give grade to that person. All right, so I think we're done. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you will have a great day.